So there were two things I came to hate by the end of this run. Number one is the move Stone Edge. Number two is the ability Sturdy. In the fullness of time, it will become apparent why. Anyway, if that didn't tip you off, this has a potential to be one of the most difficult of these challenge runs I think I've attempted, because in this run we're attempting to beat the game, which in this case means beating Alder after the second round of Elite 4 members with the fewest battles possible, and here are just a few things that may well add to that difficulty. Number one, Black and White are considered to have quite a steep level curve. With our chosen Pokemon Volcarona, we may start to feel that quite early on. And number two, XP works differently in Gen 5 compared to the rest that precede it. To put it simply, if you're higher level than the Pokemon you're battling, you'll be getting less XP. If you're a lower level, you'll get more, to save you from being too OP. Honestly, in a minimum battles challenge, I don't know if this ultimately works in our favour or not. And number three is just my ignorance of Black and White. It has been a long time since I've played these games, not since release. So Volcarona, a Pokemon chosen less for its viability, but more because I just think it's kind of neat. If we look at its stats, the standout is its special attack, and to a lesser extent its special defense and speed. However, you can see Volcarona's failings in its attack and defense. Pretty poor, a base 60 for attack and a base 65 for defense. This thing is, I guess, like a real bug, kind of fragile. Not to mention, if we take a look at Volcarona's typing, it resists quite a lot. However, the flying, water, and especially rock weaknesses are going to be a killer. Another disadvantage we're at with Volcarona is its move pool. It doesn't really learn anything good until level 59, Quiver Dance, which raises its special attack, defense, and speed by one stage. So as you might expect, we will be heavily relying on the TMs a great deal in this run and anything else we can use to our advantage. So let's just quickly go over the rules before we kick off properly. Number one is no items in battle. Held items are fine, but we can't use things like potions, X items, etc. If we did, we could simply set up and sweep or stall out our battles. Two is no catching of wild Pokemon unless it's for HM purposes or a trade. With the Pokemon we're choosing, it'd be impossible to complete the game otherwise. Now, these Pokemon can be in our party, but if they were to participate in battle, they just have to not attack and get KO'd. Number three is no fighting a trainer unless we absolutely have to, i.e. we can't progress the game unless we do so. Now, there may be instances where there is a choice about who we fight, with our choice ideally being the trainer with fewer Pokemon. I'll be keeping a record of the battles on screen. In the description, you'll also find a list of all the trainers in a Google Doc if you're interested. 4. No save states in battle. This challenge is already hard enough and honestly not consistent, so for things like the Elite 4, save states between them may be used for testing purposes, like devising a strategy. Then when we have to run through them without saving in between. Spoiler for the Elite 4, the second time round I save between members, and at another point, which I'll bring up and explain later, mitigating circumstances in the extreme. And that's it, those are the rules. So next, kicking off the game, I insert Volcarona instead of Tepig because it makes the most sense. I also shoot for a modest Volcarona, though traditionally, competitively, you'd maybe focus on speed. We need more attacking power than anything else. The battle with Snivy and Oshawott aren't worth talking about. Honestly, nothing really is until we face the first gym. So at Striaton Gym, one element that does work in our favour is that most gyms force you to fight all their trainers, unlike in previous games where, more often than not, you can simply skip them. Obviously, that's just fine for us because we need as much XP as we can get. By the time we reach the gym leader, we've engaged in a total of 8 battles, and the way this gym works is that the leader you fight depends on the starter that you chose. In our case, our starter was quotation marks Tepig, so we fought Cress. Cress starts off with their Lillipup. Our moveset, because I've yet to cover it, is Ember, String Shot, Leech Life and Gust, which leaves a lot to be desired. We're also 2 levels lower than the Lillipup at level 10. But we start the battle off with Ember, which does well over half damage to Lillipup. It then goes for Workup, which won't do it much good. We stick with Ember and it goes down. Next up is Panpour. Its water typing means that it has the advantage against us, so I stick with Gust. It does around a quarter, which really is not great, and Panpour's water gun easily does 1/3 to us. I don't really expect to win, so continue to use Gust while Panpour goes for Workup. I go for one more Gust, and I'm confident another should finish it off, but Panpour uses water gun, leaving us on just 8 HP, and then Cress uses a potion on Panpour. My Gust takes it just below half HP, the second one does a little more, and then we get the water gun, and we're done. Though I didn't know it at the time, there is one mandatory trainer in the Dream Yard to the east which I could have taken advantage of, but you live and you learn. So we try things again, and again, and again, until we get a more favourable result, something that will be indicative of this entire run. Our approach to Lillipup hasn't changed. 2 Embers are more than enough to finish it off. For Pampor, I go for Gust. It uses Work Up, Gust again, and you can see with the lower damage rolls, it makes this a 5-hit KO. One more Gust, and then Pampor finally decides to attack with Water Gun. It does a fair bit of damage, but the Aurum Berry I equipped brings us back over half HP. I decided to go for Leech Life, I'm not sure why. Perhaps because I was expecting the potion and wanted a more favourable range. Pampor then uses Water Gun, which leaves me on just 2 HP. I go for Gust, and then Crest goes for the potion. I'm expecting things are pretty much over. I use Gust anyway, it takes it below half. I use one more Gust, and it crits. Yeah, so in this run, when we get luck, we absolutely take it. And we will need a lot of luck this run. We'll keep things moving to Nacrene, I don't know. While M was outside, this was the only occasion he did not cause us an issue. The leader of Nacrene Gym is Lenora, who is a normal type trainer with a Herdier and a Watchog. Lenora herself was a pain. The Herdier isn't too much of an issue. We're now at level 16, having fought a total of 21 trainers before reaching her. Herdier is still 2 levels above us, however, it uses Intimidate, but we don't care about that. We go for Ember and get crit, which, while nice, means Lenora will heal next turn. Luckily, we avoid the Herdier's takedown. As expected, the super potion comes along. We use Ember, and that's what I was concerned about. It doesn't do more than 50% of Herdier's HP. I use Ember again. Herdier then uses takedown. This time it hits, doing well over half my HP, and subsequently knocking Herdier out. I'm not expecting great things against the Watchog. It has Crunch, Retaliate, and Hypnosis. I start with Ember and maybe it does 1/4. Watchog then goes for Hypnosis and misses. I use Ember and get a better roll this time around, but then Watchog hits me with Hypnosis. I doubt I'm going to wake up, and I don't. It uses Retaliate, I'm at 7 HP, still asleep. Watchog uses Crunch, and that is me done. The next series of battles end up taking me longer than Crest. Because we're early in the game, a lot of Pokemon we face, especially normal ones, rely on physical attacks. With Volcarona being so brittle, it really feels every hit. When facing the Herdier, because our Ember doesn't do over half, it would use Takedown, get healed eventually, and then I was unable to knock it out, so it would KO me. There were clutch times where Volcarona's Flame Body would activate, burning the Herdier and lessening its attack, but even still, I'd be on low HP for Watchog and just get knocked out. There was one instance where I was in the best possible position. Herdier comes out, I go for Ember which hits, Herdier then misses with Takedown, I then use Ember again which crits and takes it out. I'm now on full HP for Watchog. When it comes out, I immediately go for another Ember. Watchog then uses Lair, I use Ember again, it uses Retaliate, then my berry activates and I get some HP back. I then use Leech Life to try and edge it into range, but it really is a pathetic move. Watchog uses Retaliate, leaving me on 4 HP, I use Ember, and it's not enough. So I try and I try some more, until eventually I use Ember, we get the burn. It uses Lair, I go for Ember and it doesn't quite knock it out. It uses Takedown, knocks itself out, and runs 37 HP after the level up. For Watchog, Ember, and we get the burn. It misses with Hypnosis. I debate what to do because I don't want it to heal, but I do just go with Ember. As expected, it doesn't knock it out, leaving it on a tiny amount of HP. Watchog uses Retaliate, leaving me on 20 HP. I'm thinking things are over, so I just use Ember anyway. As expected, out comes the Super Potion. Again, Ember, and it does quite good damage. I go for one more and hope for the crit, which I don't get. Watchog uses Retaliate, leaving me on just 3 HP and allowing its burn to knock it out. It seems that persistence makes its own luck. So I'm expecting Castelia Gym to be both difficult and easy, if that makes sense. Its leader, Berg, is the Bug type, while Ember will be effective. It's the Dwebble and it's Smackdown that's worrying. Berg's first Pokemon is his Whirlipede, and by this time we fought around 31 trainers, bringing us close to its level of 21. Ember, thankfully, is a one-shot. we level up, and out comes Driftveil. I went for Gust because I wasn't confident that Ember would be a one-hit KO, and while the move does decent damage, Driftveil's knockdown absolutely obliterates us. I try again. Nothing's changed with the Whirlipede, it still goes down easy. Now when Driftveil comes out, I go for Gust again, and it goes for Sand Attack, high IQ strats. I go for Ember, and I miss. Who's the idiot now, eh? It then uses Smackdown that, thankfully, without the crit, leaves us on 30 HP, allowing me to use Ember, fainting the Driftveil and leaving Berg to bring out his last Pokemon, the Livani. I use Ember, and it's a one-shot. Job done. Next up is Cheren, and before I mentioned that my ignorance was one of the roadblocks in this run, and no more was it apparent than here. While I won't say what I could have done to make this battle with Cheren much easier, if you've played Black and White and know Volcarona, you'll have a good enough idea. I won't spoil it though until I realise my mistake later. So fighting Cheren sucks mainly because of his evolved Oshawott, which is now a Dewott. When you face him on Route 4, he has a Pidove, which we don't really care about, a Pansy, which is kind of annoying, and the aforementioned Dewott with Razor Shell, and the Leopard, which we're strong against. Oh yeah, and there's a Sandstorming effect during this match too. Starting off the battle, when Pidove comes out, a couple of Embers is usually enough, though we got a crit here. Next comes out the Dewott, and this is where I began to face the wall. Gust is really the only move that we have, and that does neutral damage. Dewott generally likes to go for combos of Focus Energy and Razor Shell to devastating effect. Typically, that's enough to take care of Volcarona. Even in the instances where we were able to progress past Dewott, we would be on such low health that Pansy would easily KO us with Incinerate. I think this was perhaps the first time of a number of times in the run where I thought to myself, is this even possible? And even though I am a few levels above Cheren's Pokemon, because of my weakness to Dewott, compounded with my lackluster moveset, I'm starting to believe that getting past him is not possible. In another amusing instance, I progress past Dewott at 14 HP, which goes down to 10 upon reaching Pansy. I use Gust, which takes off more than half its health. Pansy then uses Yawn, which allows me to get a Gust off again. Darude comes along and brings me down to 6 HP, Gust takes it out. I'm on 5 HP, thinking I can get a Leech Life to restore health. But no. So what eventually happens? Well, we start with Ember on Pidove, which is a one-shot. Dewott then comes out, and I now use Struggle Bug, which I've overwritten String Shot for. This now does around a quarter. Dewott uses Water Sport, I go for Struggle Bug again, and it leaves Dewott with less than a quarter of its health, but I know the berry is coming. It's healed for just under half its HP. Dewott then goes for Focus Energy. I finally use Struggle Bug, and it crits, meaning that the only damage I've taken from Dewott was the Sandstorm chip damage. I now have the most HP that I've had for Pansy. I immediately go for Struggle Bug, which wasn't great. I go for it again, however, aiming to lower its special attack damage. However, it's used Yawn, which ends up putting me to sleep. Pansy uses Bite, which doesn't do a ton of damage. Thankfully, after one turn of sleep, I wake up and use Gust, which knocks Pansy out. Now I'm facing Cheren's final Pokemon, the Leopard, with decent HP. I go for Leech Life to gain back some of that HP that I've lost. Leopard eventually uses Taunt, but that's no problem. I then use Struggle Bug, which knocks out Leopard. The struggle is real. If only I had realised my mistakes sooner. Now, if you thought I'd been walled by Cheren, then you have not seen anything yet. This battle is truly where I thought I had to abandon the challenge. When you reach Nimbasa City, you're forced to go to the amusement park where you see N again, and ultimately you have to battle him. At first glance, his team may not seem like much, and they're really not, except for the Sigilyph. Let me show you why. First up is Sandile. We use Ember here, Sandile uses Embargo. Fine, we use another Ember. Then Sigilyph comes out. I go for Ember and it does decent damage, like a third. Sigilyph then uses Tailwind, a move which gives it attacking priority. With this priority, it will then use Air Cutter, and as you can see, it's doing nearly half damage easily. While we use another Ember, which puts us within range for us to take it down with our next attack, Sigilyph will then use Air Cutter again, bringing us down to 19 HP. We use Ember, and it doesn't knock it out. So when we go to attack next, it still has priority, and it misses. Okay, we then use Leech Life, and it KOs Sigilyph. When Darumaka next comes out, I'm a little unsure of what to do. I really need health, but Leech Life is trash and I need to just get through these Pokemon. Eventually I use Gust and it does less than half damage. Darumaka uses Fire Punch, and now we really are toast. The pattern continues much like that for some time. More often than not, I am getting KO'd by the Sigilyph due to Air Cutter, and much like before, even if I do make it past, I'm still taking too much damage from Darumaka. I try again and again. At one point, my luck fares a little better. For Sigilyph, I get off an Ember, it then uses Tailwind. However, when its next Air Cutter misses, I can use Ember. While its second Air Cutter doesn't miss, leaving me on 49 HP, it's a better place than I've been so far, so I finish it off with an Ember. Tailwind is still in effect when Darumaka comes out, meaning it gets to go first with Fire Punch, leaving me on 15 HP. I use Gust, which now does over half, meaning it was at range. Tailwind peters out, so I'll now go first. Gust again, and Darumaka thankfully faints. Now, this is the first time I've seen the Scraggy. The cogs in my head need a minute to start turning while I check its weaknesses, none of which I can exploit, so I use Gust. It nearly defeats it, but leaves it with a tiny bit of health. Scraggy uses Feint Attack and I'm down. After failing God knows how many times because I stopped counting, I relented and used a couple of rare candies to hopefully take some of the ranges out of my attacks. Honestly though, it really wasn't having much of an effect. Sigilyph or Darumaka would still defeat me. I'm really at a loss here. And as you might not find surprising, my ignorance for the game shines through once again. But one of the other factors that plays into this run, in black and white more so than others, is the cost of items, particularly TMs. At Nimbasa City, Pokemon is a TM for Light Screen, which will mitigate special damage, and with Air Cutter being a special move, it may be my way out. However, I basically have to sell nearly everything I've gotten up to this point to afford it. I've chosen not to use my rare candies this time, seeing if Light Screen will get me through. Sandile is dealt with much the same way, and we move on to Sigilyph. I first set up Light Screen, and it gets a crit. Let's try that again. So I set up Light Screen, Sigilyph uses Tailwind, fine. When it uses Air Cutter, it's doing around 15 damage, so better than before. Ember is still not great, but good enough. Sigilyph then uses Air Cutter, leaving me on 48 HP. I use Ember, and I crit, which is lucky. When Darumaka comes out, we still have the Light Screen up, but Tailwind is also still in effect, and Fire Punch does decent damage. However, Tailwind fades after its attack, meaning that when I use my next Gust, I'm able to KO it. When Scraggy comes out, I use Gust, and it still nearly KOs it, but it's still not enough. Scraggy uses Feint Attack, and yeah. Okay, so I relent again. Light Screen and rare candies, I'm now at level 26. Sandile, Ember, 1-8 KO, Sigilyph, I use Light Screen, it uses Tailwind. I use Ember, but Air Cutter gets there first and it doesn't do much. We get in a back and forth, which eventually leaves me with 42 HP before I can finish it off. Darumaka is next and I go for Gust. That Tailwind has gone, so I go first. It does half, we then get Fire Punch. I'm left on 9 HP. Light Screen wears off, but we finish it off. Then Scraggy. I use Gust and we get a crit. My god, that was something else. Finally, we can head to Nimbasa Gym. Elisa has 2 Emolga, which both know Aerial Ace, a move that does not work in our favour, and she has the Zebstrika, which has Spark. Though I'm not worried about its moves, I am worried about its speed. In our first exploratory battle, I started off with Ember against the Emolga. While it does respectable damage, Aerial Ace takes far too much health from us. Though we can defeat it with another attack, when the next Emolga comes out, because we're not KOing it in one, it can use Aerial Ace, and you know the story. As it's plain to see, there are no significant battles with Volcarona that come easily. A limited moveset, poor physical defense, they just all compound, meaning that a fair helping of luck is required in the majority of encounters, which I'm not really fond of. I do make it to the Zebstrika on occasion, however, Zebstrika will always go first, often using Spark, which puts me at dangerously low health. While it does get burned, lessening its attack, it's not going to take much to KO me. Not only that, but Ember seems to do just about half, meaning it would at least be a 2-hit KO minimum. However, after trying multiple times, our luck does finally improve. For the Emolga, I stick with Ember, it uses Aerial Ace and does a fair chunk of damage. Elisa then uses a Hyper Potion, which I've rarely seen, but it does mean the KO on the Emolga is free. 2 more Embers deal with it. For the next Emolga, of course, we use Ember, and then for some reason, Emolga uses Pursuit, which does hardly anything, leaving us on 50 HP. Flame Body then activates, Emolga gets burned, and even though Elisa uses a Hyper Potion, it won't do her much good. 2 more Embers then take out the Morgan, meaning that we'll be facing the Zeb Striker on the most HP so far. I'm expecting it to outspeed and go for Spark, which it does, so I line up Ember. Not only does it take us down to 70 HP, but it gets the paralysis too, and I'm thinking it's over. I use Ember anyway, it hits, it crits. You know, I think all our final Pokemon victories have been crits for the past couple. It's crazy. So we've now got Cheren and his Duot again, and before I mention my gaming ignorance, well, this is where I've finally rectified it a little bit. I'll go over things briefly, but we run into the same issues as before. I didn't have Struggle Bug when facing the Lipard, but that didn't matter too much because of Leech Life actually being okay. However, Duot, Razor Shell, yada yada, I went back to my old strat Struggle Bug on the Duot. While it did maybe 1/3 combined with Duot's Citrus Berry, it's still not enough. I tried this battle for like an hour, dozens of attempts, could not get past the Duot. Frustrated, I went back to the TN's list for Black and White. I'd seen Solar Beam on there earlier, and it's a move Volcarona can learn. However, I'd just done a quick Google search and the first answer had something to the effect of, yeah, you can get it, but you need Surf. And I was like, damn, that's a real shame. And I left it at that for a while. But then something in the back of my mind told me to dig a little deeper. So I did. And as you guessed, you don't need Surf to get Solar Beam. I could have gotten it my first time through Pinwheel Forest for that other battle with Cheren. I am an idiot. So we get Solar Beam and we teach it to Volcarona, and the difference is, well, just look. Lipard is first, it uses Fake Out, I use Ember, I then use Leech Life, next for Duot. First turn, Solar Beam charge, Duot then uses Razor Shell, Flame Body activates, nice. We use Solar Beam and yeah, night and day. This is now the first time I've seen the Tranquil, something we're weak to, but Ember then takes it out in one. Finally, after ejecting Fire Spin, Pansear comes out. I go for Gust, it uses Yawn, I use Ember to style on it, and yeah, that is it. I still can't believe how much time I wasted. Driftveil Gym is up next, and we should, in theory, have an easier time here considering the ground typing. By the time we actually reach Clay, we've engaged in 51 battles. However, Clay isn't a sure thing by any means. While we've gotten to a state where we are just above the level of the gym leader, and we have a type advantage, it's not smooth sailing. In my first battle, I used Solar Beam against the Krokorok, which does take it out in one after it uses Bulldoze. However, that Bulldoze lowers our speed, so that when Excadrill comes out, it gets to go first, and it uses Rock Slide, which is super effective. Next, I then ditch Leech Life for Struggle Bug, because we need to ensure that the Krokorok won't hit us. Struggle Bug is a one-hit KO. While it does mean that when Excadrill comes out, we'll still go first, our Ember does not do enough to KO it. Excadrill can then get off Rock Slide and it easily knocks us out. Unfortunately, as is the case with our Brittleness, all we can do is hope the opposing Pokemon misses, which is a really luck-based strat. However, we don't really have another choice. Anyway, Krokorok comes out, Struggle Bug deals with it, Excadrill is next, one Ember, Excadrill then finally misses with Rock Slide, so that we can use our second Ember to knock it out. Finally comes out the Palpitoad, which I have not seen before. I decided to go with Solar Beam because I know its moves can't really damage us. Palpitoad uses Bulldoze, and while it drops our speed, I doubt it will matter very much. We pop off the Solar Beam and, as you might expect, Palpitoad is defeated. After this gym, while the next significant battle is with N once again, it is nothing like it was before. While he does have a Bulldog with the Frustrating Sturdy ability, it's nothing like what's to come. We now have to contend with Skylar at Mistralton Gym, a flying type which we're weak to. Something tells me that using Volcarona for this run may have been a mistake. Skylar's Pokemon do have some devastating moves for us, particularly Swoobat's Acrobatics, a base 55 power move that doubles in power if you're not holding an item, and you can bet that this thing is not holding anything. Incidentally, I really like Swoobat and Woobat's design. Anyway, Unpheasant has Air Slash, as does the Swanna, which also has Aerial Ace and Bubble Beam. However, I'm not too concerned about it, which will become apparent soon enough. First time around, and our levels have shot up quite a bit, which is thanks to the lucky egg you get from Professor Juniper, which is pretty integral to the run. However, Skylar then uses a Hyper Potion, and you can pretty much guess what's going to happen next. Ember then does less than half, as does the second Ember we use. Swoobat then goes for Acrobatics, and it takes off a fair chunk of our health. I then immediately reset because I know we're not on enough health for the rest of the Pokemon. Next time I go for Struggle Bug first for some reason. Swoobat uses Acrobatics, but I decide to at least see what Unpheasant has to offer. I don't use Whirlwind because it's trash. When it does come out, I use Ember and it nearly KOs it. Unpheasant goes for Air Slash, which doesn't do too much damage. Despite Skylar's Hyper Potion, it won't do much good, leaving us against the Swanna. I go for Solar Beam, expecting an Aqua Ring, but because I'm in range of being KO'd, it goes for Air Slash. Yeah, so we need to be in a position, ideally with more health, where we can ensure it goes for Aqua Ring, allowing us to charge our Solar Beam. Thankfully, it's a position that we're able to get into on the next go. Against the Swoobat, we use Ember and it KOs the Swoobat in one. Then, when Unpheasant comes out, it's another serving of Crispy Duck, and it's taken out in one. Finally, for Swanna, I, for some reason, still don't understand, decide to go Fly. Perhaps because I didn't think it'd make the range, which seems strange. Swanna then uses Air Slash, I then go for Solar Beam. Swanna uses Aerial Ace, and we're left with just 16 HP. But then I use Solar Beam and it's because it's not going to be super effective. I totally forgot about the typing. But anyway, that's Skylar done with. In Icirrus Gym, we have to fight quite a number of trainers before tackling Bryson, and unlike with the other gyms, there is no preamble before doing so. Because this gym, and by extension Leader, are all Ice types, I'm anticipating it'll be the easiest, even with my pathetic Ember. Upon eventually reaching Bryson, he leads off with Vanillish. We immediately fire up the grills and take it down with Ember. Next is the Beartic. It's bulky, so I'm not expecting the one-shot, nor do I get it. Beartic then uses Swagger before Bryson uses a Hyper Potion. We hit ourselves in confusion not once, but twice. Beartic then uses Brine, and then we hit ourselves in confusion for a third time, followed up with Brine again. Wow. I do, however, have a backup, Fire Blast. I simply teach that to Volcarona. Now, when Vanillish appears, I still go for Ember for the accuracy, but when Beartic arrives, I make sure to go for Fire Blast. We hit and it's a one-shot. Bryson then sends out Cryogonal, again Fire Blast easily melts it, and that's Bryson. A nice change of pace, unfortunately it will not last too long. After more plot and whatnot, we finally arrive in Opelucid City, where we can face, in this version at least, Striaton. We don't have any moves that are particularly good against Dragon Pokemon, and they tend to resist all our moves too, so I'm not quite sure how I should handle this. One thing in our favour is that their moves aren't exactly super effective against us, but they are mainly physical attackers, which is not really Volcarona's wheelhouse. However, Bug is neutral damage, so that's something at least. For Drayden's first Pokemon, the Fracture, I start off with Silver Wind, and I'm surprised that it one-shots the Fracture. When Druddigon comes out, I go for the same move again, and it does pretty decent damage too. Not only that, Druddigon then uses Revenge, which does hardly anything. I decide to go for Struggle Bug, believing that I'll need as many Silver Winds as possible for the Haxorus, but unfortunately it's not enough to KO it, and the Druddigon then uses Night Slash. While not particularly effective, it's still damage I can't afford to take, but Flame Body activates, finishing off the Druddigon. Finally, we get the Haxorus. I use Silver Wind, which does well more than half. Haxorus uses Assurance, which crits, but Flame Body activates once again, cutting its attack. As expected, we see the Hyper Potion, but with Silver Wind doing the damage it does, I'm pretty confident. 1 Silver Wind, 2 Silver Winds, and we're done. First try victory. Well, we'll never see that again. With all the badges collected, we can now tackle Victory Road, do some prep before the Elite Four, and bring the Team Plasma story to a close. Make no mistake, some of our toughest battles lay ahead. Firstly, I get all the rare candies I can. However, I aim to delay using them for as long as possible because I'm worried about the N and Ghetsis battle coming up. I also pick up some hold items like the Silver Powder to increase my bug damage. Funnily enough, if you get the powder from Pinwheel Forest and then jump over the fence, you then must fight a trainer there, so I learned that the hard way. What is worth saying about the Elite Four this time around is that you can challenge them in any order, which is sort of a blessing for us. Overall, we have Chantal, the Ghost type, Grimly, the Dark type, Caitlyn, the Psychic type, and Marshall, the Fighting type. While in theory Volcarona is a good matchup for all these trainers, there are a few frustrating roadblocks ahead. The very first is what I mentioned way back at the start of this thing, Stone Edge. The second is the ability Sturdy, and wouldn't you know it, but Marshall's Pokemon, with the exception of Mianxiao, all have Stone Edge. Plus, Zork has Sturdy, meaning we can't one-hit KO it, but I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. So Marshall is what I hated the most about this run, because the only way to win was through sheer luck. You see, he'll always start off with throw. By now we're level 54 and have fought a total of 104 battles. We have yet to use our rare candies, but this level advantage is crucial. And we still don't have access to some great moves like Flamethrower and Psychic, nor have we yet leveled to where we can get Overheat, Bug Buzz or Quiver Dance for Volcarona. Anyway, with Throw, by having the Charcoal equipped and using Fire Blast, we can consistently KO it. Now the wall that is Sock. What you're seeing is after many attempts to find a strat that works. This strat starts off by using Will-o-the-Wisp, because if we were to just use Fire Blast, Sturdy would activate, and if Stone Edge then missed, Marshall would heal, and we'd have to use another Fire Blast, which can miss. So in the rare, very rare occasions where we can get the burn and the miss from Stone Edge, we can then use Fire Blast and it will knock Sock out. When Conkeldurr comes out, another Fire Blast is more than fine, and that move will also work just fine for the Mienshao. Easy every time, right? While in this run, I decided to go for Chantal next. I will ultimately renege on that decision. The thinking was to go to her after Marshall because the Jellicent and the Chandelure could be slightly problematic. Before facing her, I do teach Volcarona Solar Beam though. I also set up Sunny Day, and I'll explain why soon. Chantal's first Pokemon is the Cofagrigus, which I'm not too concerned about. I set up Sunny Day, it uses Shadow Ball and we don't get the special drop. I do however miss my first Fire Blast. It then uses Shadow Ball again, and we're at 82 HP before my Fire Blast can KO it. Next up is the Jellicent, and now I can use Solar Beam in just one hit to easily KO it. However, my Sunny Day was a double-edged sword because Solar Beam hardly does anything to Chandelure, which then uses Fire Blast and I'm KO'd. Now, the next time around, when I finally got past Marshall after like 10 attempts, I decided to face Grimsley instead. I don't really see much point showing the Marshall match again because it's literally the same thing. So Grimsley is Dark type. The only move of his Pokemon that is actually dangerous is the Bisharp's Aerial Ace, but we have Fire Blast for that. For his Pokemon, the Scrafty, we can use Silver Wind, which unfortunately isn't a one-hit KO. It then uses Crunch, which does about a quarter. Another Silver Wind takes care of it. Then for the Lipard, it will always go for Fake Out first, but we can then use Silver Wind and it goes down in one. Then when Bisharp comes out, we just use Fire Blast to take it down. Grimsley's final Pokemon is the Crocodile, and Silver Wind knocks it out relatively easy. Next, I decide to tackle Caitlyn. Again, we see the strength of Bug for this Elite Four, with 3 out of 4 of her Pokemon weak to it. However, we have a plan for the Sigilyph. Caitlyn starts the battle with Reuniclus, whose special defense isn't all that. By using one Silver Wind, we can take it down. Next is the Sigilyph, and I get flashbacks then. However, this time we have Fire Blast, which takes it out in one. For the Gothitelle, I use Struggle Bug because I know Silver Wind is not a one-hit KO. Struggle Bug does over half, Gothitelle uses Calm Mind, and I can then use another Silver Wind. If I use Silver Wind first, Gothitelle will use Calm Mind, then Caitlyn will use a Hyper Potion and it will turn into a 3-hit KO. Finally is the Musharna. I use Silver Wind and it just about hangs on. It then uses Psychic and it gets a full restore too. However, it's pretty much over. I use Struggle Bug and then I'm able to use Silver Wind to defeat Caitlyn. Now finally is Chantal. Our game plan hasn't changed from before. She starts with the Cofagrigus, we set up Sunny Day, it then uses Shadow Ball and we get the special defense drop. Fire Blast still takes it out though. Jellicent is next, Solar Beam is one-hit KO. Now for Chandelure, and I'm wary about the fire damage. I use Solar Beam hoping to not get a crit and put it in healing range, but it does crit. Chandelure then uses Fire Blast and misses. I use Fire Blast, expecting a heal, but it doesn't come, and Chandelure has been snuffed out. Finally, Golurk comes in. While Sunny Day has faded, I just need to not get KO'd and we've won. I charge Solar Beam, Golurk uses Earthquake, leaving us on 61 HP. However, it's far too late, and when our Solar Beam hits, we've defeated Chantal. Unlike previous games, you can't tackle the champion right away. Upon reaching the top, you find that N has already beaten you to the punch. Not only that, in true anime fashion, a giant castle sprouts from the ground and you are now forced to go and defeat N. One thing to note here is that before you face N, you are required to catch whichever boxed legendary is relevant to your version of the game. In our case, for Black, it was Reshiram. The game then wants you to use that legendary in the upcoming battle, but we don't want that. Volcarona is all the Pokemon we need. So in order to mitigate this, we have to ensure that our party is already full. By doing this, the game asks you if you'd like to add the legendary to your party, which you can refuse. So that's what we do, and then we're ready for the final battle with N. After much pain and testing, in which I of course saved before this battle because it would melt my brain if I didn't, I managed on a strategy. I have also used all my rare candies, meaning I now have Quiver-Dance, Silverwind, Will-O-Wisp, and Heatwave. Against Zekrom, we start with Will-O-Wisp, and we miss. Then Zekrom uses Fusion Bolt. As you can see, it's doing well over a third, which isn't good. We simply can't have that much HP taken off us with no way to fight back, so let's try that again. When Will-O-Wisp finally hits, and this was on like my 8th attempt, Fusion Bolt has gone from doing 1/3 to about a 5th. This then allows us to set up Quiver-Dance. Zekrom uses Light Screen, which isn't great, but it's better than being hit. We go for another Quiver-Dance, Zekrom uses another Fusion Bolt, and we're just over a half HP. I then choose to set up a third and final Quiver-Dance. Zekrom uses Fusion Bolt again, and Volcarona is now at 81 HP. This means that Silverwind is now a KO. For Carracosta, I go with Will-O-Wisp. It hits. Carracosta uses Stone Edge and Rip. Now you see, it took over 8 tries just to get past Zekrom, and we still have a Carracosta with Stone Edge and Sturdy. Now I don't see much value in covering any more of these failures because we know the confluence of luck required to get through this. So let's see what can actually happen when things go good, however statistically rare it may be. As we've done before, for Zekrom we start with Will-O-Wisp, Fusion Bolt, then we start with our Quiver-Dances. Zekrom goes for Light Screen again, we get our second Quiver-Dance, Fusion Bolt again, we're at 121 HP. As before, I still want that third Quiver-Dance. Zekrom uses its final Fusion Bolt. The thing is, our health doesn't matter because if Stone Edge hits, it's an automatic KO. There's no range, so it's pointless. When Carracosta comes out, I go for Will-O-Wisp to mitigate Sturdy. Luckily, Light Screen then wears off. We get the Stone Edge miss. I had equipped the Bright Powder too. We then use Silver Wind and it defeats Carracosta. It's my first time seeing the Archeops, and it can easily KO us too. I think for a moment, because I knew its special defense isn't great, I decided to use Heatwave. And because of the Quiver-Dance, it's a 1-hit KO. For Klinklang, it's no issue because it's weak to Overheat. For the Zoroark, Silver Wind is its weakness and it goes down. Finally, Vanillux is weak to fire, so we use Overheat. Think of how easy that would be if there was no Carracosta. Now, Ghetsis, and you bet I save between this. In my first battle, I start with Quiver-Dance, but the Cofagrigus then uses Toxic. With the damage Toxic will do, we don't have much future in this battle. Funnily enough, though this battle is not as difficult as N or Marshall, it's just a bit trickier. After a few more attempts, I finally relent and do not use Quiver-Dance on the Cofagrigus. Instead, I start with Heatwave, which is a 1-hit KO. Next for Bisharp, another Overheat will do the job. When Seismitoad comes out, I go for Silver Wind because it's all I have. It does over half, which is fine. It then goes for Rain Dance, which is what we want because it can use Muddy Water, which could lower our accuracy. Rain Dance does, however, lower our potential fire damage. We then use another Silver Wind, and that is Seismitoad done. Hydreigon is dark and can't do a great deal to us, so in anticipation of that, and wanting to outlast the rain, as well as ensure we can deal with both Electros and Bouffant, I set up a Quiver-Dance. Hydreigon uses Surf, which is super effective, but our special defense helps us out. I set up another Quiver-Dance. We then get hit by Surf again. At 68 HP, it's about time I move on, so I use Silver Wind, and it's an easy 1-hit KO. Thankfully, the rain stops, so I use Heatwave on the Buffalon, and it knocks it out. Finally, we have the Electros. I opt for another Heatwave, and Electros is down. Though that may not have conveyed it well, there was such a ton of trial and error in both these battles. I was just glad for them to be over. But the game's not over yet, because we have Alder and the remaining Elite Four rematch. So prior to rematching the Elite Four, I grabbed the remaining rare candies and TMs like Psychic and Flamethrower. Now, what I have to stress here is that this version of Marshall was the most infuriating portion of the whole run. It was so RNG heavy, it stopped being fun and was just annoying. It's the same story as before, Stone Edge and Sturdy. So let's dispense with it and just go through it. As I said before, you bet I am saving in between them because this run needs to be put to bed. Breloom is now the first in his team. After testing, I have to set up a Quiver-Dance so I can get my ranges on Psychic. Breloom then typically uses Sky Uppercut, which does good enough damage. then a flamethrower is all you need for it. Next up comes our friend Sork. As before, to circumvent Sturdy, we use Will-O-Wisp. We get the Stone Edge Mist, then we use Psychic to finish it off. Conkeldurr will go down to another Psychic. We do teach Volcarona Bug Buzz for the upcoming battle. Then when Mienshao comes out, we can use Psychic, which is a one-hit KO. For throw, Psychic isn't a one-shot, nearly but not quite. However, despite getting the heal, it can't withstand another few Psychics and we can dispense with it. Finally is Toxicroak, but it won't be a problem because of its 4 times weakness to Psychic. With it down, we are done with Marshall for the final time. Thank God. Next, I go to Grimsley. You can't set up on the Sharpedo because it'll use Waterfall and then Aqua Jet to finish you off. Instead, you go for Bug Buzz right away, and there's no way that Sharpedo can handle it. For the Scrafty, I opt for Flamethrower because Bug isn't effective. The Scrafty does have Head Smash, which is a rock move that will one-shot us, but luckily we get the miss, and can then go for Bug Buzz to knock it out. While Crocodile rears its head, it just requires 1 Bug Buzz. For the Lipard, we do exactly the same thing. It goes for Fake Out, of course, but it doesn't matter in the end. Bisharp isn't anything to worry about because Flamethrower will obliterate it. Finally, we have Drapion, and we have no super effective moves. I choose to go with Flamethrower. It does well over half, which is good. We also get Flame Body. Even though Drapion then gets healed via a full restore, it doesn't matter because we still outspeed it to get in 2 hits and defeat it. For Caitlyn, we start with Moshana. I go for Bug Buzz and it's a one-shot. Sigilith then comes out. We use Flamethrower. It doesn't knock it out, so it then uses Air Slash. It does a ton of damage, bringing us to 86 HP. There is no heal for it though, meaning that our Flamethrower will knock it out. We then have Metagross, but we also have Flamethrower, and despite its bulk, Flamethrower is a one-hit KO. For the Reuniclus, we use Bug Buzz, which is another one-shot. Then for Gothitelle, we switch things up with Bug Buzz, which is super effective and a one-hit KO. Caitlyn's last Pokemon is Bronzong. It being Steel, 1 Flamethrower is all that is required, and that is Caitlyn beaten. We're now on the last member of the Elite Four, Chantal. She starts with Cofagrigus. Unlike Ghetsis' Cofagrigus, it doesn't have Toxic, so I choose to set up Quiver Dances while it likes to use Shadow Ball. However, its Shadow Ball, even if it gets the drop, isn't too great. However, when I get to 83 HP, I decide it's time to move on, so use Flamethrower. Jellicent is up, I use Psychic. It nearly one-shots, but not quite. It then uses Hydro Pump, which misses. Chantal uses a full restore, but it's pointless because we can use Psychic to knock it out. For Drifblim, I need to remind myself of its weakness before using Flamethrower. Then we have Chandelure. I seem to have a bit of a think until I finally use Psychic, which faints it. Next is Golurk. I eventually use Flamethrower. Finally is the Frostlass, which should be no issue. However, the Frostlass has Ice Shard, a priority move that takes us down to 48 HP before we use Flamethrower. Now, that's all the Elite Four done, which means that finally we can face Alder, and we're actually a decent matchup. Alder's first Pokemon is the Excelgor. While it does outspeed us, it can't do much, so I decide to start setting up the Quiver Dances, as Excelgor does less and less damage. In the end, just after passing half HP, I use Flamethrower, which is an easy W. For Bouffalon, I believe I should have enough stat increases to deal with it. I use Flamethrower and it is a one-shot. Escavalier is Steel, so Flamethrower once again. Now we see ourselves. The only effective move I have against it is Psychic, and I'm skeptical of a one-hit KO. However, it does. Druddigon is pretty useless against us, so I use Psychic. It faints, and now we have Vanillux, Flamethrower. And that is Alder. With his defeat, we've beaten the game. Yeah, there's Cynthia, but I don't quite count her in this because we get credits. After all that, we finished the game with a total of 116 mandatory battles, which all things said is quite low. Volcarona, I still think it's a cool Pokemon, but for a minimum battles run, no thank you. Too brittle and with really poor moves unless you're reaching its higher levels. However, I can't deny that it was a lot of fun and we had to employ some interesting strats considering our limited move pool. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know, and I've also included a list of all the trainers I fought and their locations in the description if you're interested. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know, and if you want to like and subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.